Hey, it's Mike Brennan, and we're back, yes, for another one of those sessions where we're going to scare your pants off talking about the latest cybersecurity news. And boy, there's a boatload of it right now. And my two experts said, per usual, that we do every month. Yeah, we have with us Richard Stiennon from IT Harvest, and we also have Dan Lohrmann from Presidio. And both these guys are Michigan natives and worked with them, God, for I don't know how long, 25, 30 years, I guess. So now you've both been traveling, you've both been to various events. Doesn't matter to me who wants to start. I know, Richard, you were at RSA, is that correct?
Yeah, it's at RSA, which is kind of the big conference for cybersecurity. About a tenth of all vendors were exhibiting, which is, if you think about it, that's pretty big, right? 382, I think, were there.
Wow.
And of course, every year you go, you only see a slice of it, right? And I actually rarely get to the conference sessions, right? Because it is a full conference, and I think there's 2,000 speakers.
Well, you
And
were
I
probably
spent,
mobbed by people that wanted your book anyway. You probably could hardly move. There'd be all
yeah,
these
yeah.
groupies were there, right? So,
I wouldn't go that far, but
oh,
yeah,
okay, all right. Well, we won't tell your wife about that then. So,
I had three to four. I had four, sit down in booths and sign books going on. So I signed 250 books. So
whoa,
that was fun,
awesome.
and that was the book was just out the week before, so that was kind of the book launch, just like the very first book, Security Yearbook 2020, was launched at RSA in February of 2020.
But of course, the difference now, instead of self-publishing, you're with Wiley, a very
That's right.
prestigious publisher, right?
Yeah, and
Making
it's
the
really
big bucks. The
nice.
Ferrari is probably already in the driveway, right? No?
Yeah, yeah, man. It's got my commission check from last year. Comes out to what did it work out to? If it takes me 3 months to write the book, which it does, I get about $1,000 a month from book sales, which is
Yeah.
better than nothing. So it's good.
Yeah, it's better than a
And what?
sharp stick in the eye. But hey, 3 grand, 3 grand is 3 grand, right?
That's right.
So,
That's right.
all right.
So I saw most of the show floor, and then all these events to go on around it as well. And the most interesting meetings were people following up with me because a week before I'd published a kind of, hey, wake up everybody. AI is changing the face of the cybersecurity industry.
Everything, in
And
fact.
I've gotten a lot of derision for it because it was a little pie in the sky, I admit. I ended up predicting that there would be $1 billion valuation AI security company by the end of the year. And a little crazier than that, I predicted that next year, by the end of next year, there'd be a company with a run rate of $1 billion in revenue doing security. And that may be easy because it may be Palo Alto, right? They just could sell something $1,000 or $100,000 worth of something to all of their customers. That'd be $1 billion. The um, Some people reached out to me, one in particular, founder of one of these AI security companies. And let me be clear, there are over 100 AI security companies.
Hmm.
Most of those are how do we protect the enterprise from users using AI because they can mess up and get in trouble. How do you protect the AI models that companies are using? How do you keep people from abusing them? And that's interesting, and that's going to be a growth industry for sure. But to me, the most interesting thing is taking the tasks that a SOC analyst does every day, which is it's not mundane at all. It's buried in this data they have to look at. Logs and stuff are evidence of attacks going on all the time, and they have to look at each alert and figure out if it's something that is okay. They can ignore it, or it means there was an attack, and they have to dig deeper. Do threat hunting, they call it. That task is going to be turned over to AI bots, and it's happening right now. I predicted it would be real by the end of the year, but it's already real. People are already doing it. So move my schedule up 7 months. That will be one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing thing ever in cybersecurity because CISOs have to do something to address lack of people and the turnover in their SOC and all this stuff. And it's going to cost less than a person, an entry level person probably, but will work 24 by 7. And I'm already seeing people talk about 100% triage, meaning every alert is looked at and determined if it's malicious or you can ignore it and move on. And to me, that's totally exciting. I talked to one of those founders, and he told me they launched in January with their product. They've been working on it for 18 months. They already have three major firms using it, and they've got six in proof of value that going on right now. And he had 20 meetings with CISOs at the conference, which is a huge amount. So that's my perspective. I don't know, so I came away very energized by RSA. I think a lot of people did. The general feel was this was the best ever, the most exciting ever. Of course, it's only, like I said, each person's individual experience, but very, very upbeat from the conference.
Yeah,
That was
speaking of AI, I have resisted because I feel it is a threat to what I do for a
it
living.
is, yeah,
But I spent the money. I'm in the middle of a course right now, and it boggles my mind what it's capable of doing. I
yep,
mean, I was watching a video yesterday, catching up on my coursework, and just if you spend the extra money, if you get the $200 version of Chat GPT, oh my God. It goes out and does all your research for you. I mean, you don't even, and it comes back to you in about 7 or 8 minutes, and there you go.
yeah,
It would take me weeks to get all
yeah.
that done,
That
So,
$20 version does that. I haven't found a need for the $200 version at
well,
all.
well,
So
But anyway, and Dan, you've been traveling too, right?
Yeah, it's actually it's great to hear Richard update and Richard's talking about his book. He sent me a note. It was great.
yeah,
Um,
your book is in
Book
the
that I wrote a
library.
couple years ago. It was in the bookstore. He's at the
Yep.
Bruce Schneider's book, which was great. That's Cyber Mayday and the day after was about 3 years old now, but it's still selling at RSA. So, but I actually this was the first time I think in 14 years I did not go to RSA, which
Oh,
I had been every year. I agree with Richard. It is the big show. We could talk lots about that, but I was actually in Philadelphia that same week. First time ever. Those who know me know that I mainly support. I do some private sector work, but I mainly support public sector and a big conference every year. There's two of them. There's the mid-year and the annual conference. The mid-year this year, which is normally in D.C., Washington D.C., was in Philadelphia. The NASCIO, National Association of State Chief Information Officers. That's what NASCIO stands for. So, excuse me, the state CISOs and state CIOs, pretty much most of them, almost all the state CIOs were there. Many of their teams, about half the CISOs are there. It was 4 days. So hearing and talking to them, and unfortunately, it was the same week as RSA. First time that I remember that's ever happened, but hopefully that won't be the same next year because I
Yeah.
really want to get back to RSA. But it was a great event, and I really felt like interestingly enough, and it was from afar because these announcements are coming out from San Francisco. But the top topics again, they have the top 10 every year. What are the hot topics? Cybersecurity is always number one. It's been number one more than a decade. What's the top priority? And then number two, right behind it, literally like 2 points behind, it was like 798 to 796 or something, was AI. So AI and cybersecurity are right there. And then wrapped around the whole list, and maybe we'll get to this in a few minutes, like number five was modernization. So a lot of things, other things on the list that really end up flowing back to AI and cybersecurity as well. Because, what are you going to do about legacy systems? And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But, just what are you going to do about different things going on in your enterprise? How are you going to address them? And the answer often is new tools or updated tools in cybersecurity, updated tools in artificial intelligence or generative AI. So those are really hot themes. The other big one, of course, wrapped around all of it is budgets. And I really found it fascinating that I saw, and I'd love to hear Richard's thoughts of what he saw at RSA. There's a lot of buzz around new tools, new products, the shiny new thing. Meanwhile, I really saw a dichotomy in the country around some states were like, I don't want to say booming because I don't want to jinx anybody, but I mean, I will tell you a number of states, and I'll just name Texas, but others that really they weren't really having budget issues around government. I mean, they from a state government perspective, they're rolling out a big new initiative, which is their own cyber command. Interesting as CISA and a lot of the federal agencies are paring back. You're seeing more, states kind of grab that mantle and Texas Cyber Command talking about regional SOCs, regional security operations centers in that part of the country. There's a similar thing in North Dakota. The North Dakota SOC, for those who are in the space, know that very well. Kind of up in the central Midwest. And so a lot of efforts around statewide, whole of state initiatives, they call them. So it's the idea that the state government could help the counties and the cities. It's been going on for a while. It's like a ransomware attack where the state, comes in and helps the county or the city or the local government if they get it, school system gets hit by ransomware. But this is more of an operational model, kind of like what Richard was talking about, the security operations centers and that monitoring and that, because these local governments, these small organizations, even some nonprofits, don't have the resources to be able to deal with these cyber attacks. So, having the statewide approach, I just find that fascinating, and hearing other states, I will tell you, and I won't start naming names, but budget cuts, 10% across the board, hiring freezes, a much more, I don't want to call it a scary outlook, but much more, concerning around budgets and staff and freezes. So really almost like the tale of two cities, really the best of times and the worst of times, depending on where you're at in the country. And we could dive more into that, but it was fascinating to talk to a lot of CIOs and CISOs and kind of get what are they seeing right now as we are in May of 2025.
Speaking of things that I heard, and I was me being a news junkie, I read everything. One of the things that came up during a hearing last week when Stiennon was getting grilled is she's taken all the cybersecurity money, or most of it, and put it into the exporting of aliens or whatever. And I'm wondering what that leaves the U.S. government with if all that money that was dedicated to cybersecurity protections is no longer being used for that. What do you all think?
But I hadn't heard that. Doesn't surprise me. Frankly, DHS wasn't doing much, right? They were setting policies and things like that. What concerns me most is the brain drain that's going on within federal government, because we spent 15 years of, the government moves so slowly to catch up with what was going on in cyberspace. They were reacting very, very slowly. Every new administration would have a whole new cybersecurity policy. It would take different flavors, and it was all about public-private partnerships, and it was just talk. All they did for 15 years was talk. And only in the last couple of years has CISA been doing good, and there were really, really smart people in charge. And even at NSA, we had Rob Joyce, who is just the right person for the job. And all those people are leaving. They're getting old. They're retiring. They
Or getting fired, for that matter. I mean,
yeah,
there's a lot of that going on right now. So.
Or just not fired so much as they're getting cut. Yeah, they're taking advantage of, right? You see the former head of CISA, Jen Easterly, on the speaking circuit.
Yeah.
And I assume she's commanding really good speaking fees and, kind of cashing in. So that's always the temptation if you're in cybersecurity. No matter what, you're underpaid in the federal government or even state and local, right, Dan?
Yeah, you have
absolutely.
experience in both sectors, Dan. We're working for the state of Michigan and now privately. So probably making a few extra bucks than you were working for the state, right? So
I certainly agree with Richard that government employees are underpaid, and I would echo exactly what Richard said. I wouldn't use the word all. I don't know if it's quite as dire as you were saying, Mike. You're going to provoking a reaction from us, which is good. I mean, I do think there are cuts that are happening, and I do think there are a lot of. I just was literally speaking with someone this morning. I won't name names, who is accepting early outs. They were offered like early. It was like a bonus to retire early, and they're like, I'm not interested in that. And they just sweetened the pot with this major agency, and they're now going to get a retirement kind of early out kind of a deal, almost like the state of Michigan did. So they've kind of sweetened the pot, and they're this one person's accepting it after 32 years in federal service. So I totally agree with Richard. I am concerned about the brain drain. I do think that there's as we've said about a month ago, I think we were on, and I don't think it's all bad. I mean, I think it's a question of where are the priorities, and where are people spending their time and energy. I am concerned that there may be some babies being thrown out with some bathwater. We have to really kind of see where the dust is going to settle. So we know, for example, let's get the specifics. There was $10 million cut from Center for Internet Security for the Election ISAC and the MS ISAC. Those cuts have happened. There's been cuts around different other programs, USAID and some others, and remains to be seen kind of where will they be backfilled? Will what is next? What other cuts are coming? I think we are in a very big period of time, whether you want to call it 90 days, 120 days. If you look at some of the reports and some of the things that have been released around resiliency plans and the cyber executive order that did come out from the Trump administration and others, a lot of them say, we will come out with a new report 90 days, 180 days, 240 days, which is pretty common amongst federal government. New president comes in, they issue these executive orders, and they say within these periods of time, we're going to have these new plans. So I want to reserve a judgment. I certainly want to come back, Mike, in the fall. And when some of those things come out, it becomes clearer where the budget really ends up and where it becomes clear what these plans are or lack of plans. And I'll call out if there's a lack of plans, a lack of strategy there. Certainly that is one outcome that could happen. I mean, I guess I'm in more of a wait and see mode. I do think there's a lot of government people, both at the state level and the federal level, that are in a period of unknowns, just very much like as we're recording this here in mid-May. It's the same kind of thing we're seeing with tariffs. For those who maybe not spun up, around cyber issues as much as Richard and I and you are, Mike, that we don't know the tariffs order they off. It's at 145% now, down to 30% with China, but that's only 90 days, and then in 90 days we'll see what happens next. I think there's a lot of that going on with cyber. And I think to Richard's point, some of the concerns are, but we need to have daily operations. We need to really think about how we can do this in an ongoing way, because certainly the attacks are continuing. The risks are still very high, and our enemies still want to take advantage of this change. So, I mean, I think they would say, some of my Republican colleagues and people that I work with and have talked to in Washington, that we are automating. Hopefully some of those technologies that Richard talked about will be deployed, and maybe they can find efficiencies. Will they certainly have vulnerabilities at the same time? Will they have holes that aren't plugged? I think that remains to be seen. So I guess I'm in more of a wait and see mode with some of that. I have some concerns. I also feel like there's some real opportunities to eliminate, as I've shared last time. I think there's some opportunities to eliminate some inefficiencies that might exist in the federal government.
Richard?
Yeah, I think the government has this opportunity over the next year to adopt the newest technology. So, I mean, frankly, most government agencies don't have the types of SOCs that they need that are manned 24/7. Most agencies don't have a CISO. So they've got a lot of catching up to do. So this may be once in a historical lifetime opportunity to leapfrog, and just like countries like Estonia and all of South America got to skip the whole telephone line thing, right? And they just went right to mobile phones. So now the entire population has jumped a whole generation of technology.
Well, China too. China kind of
China
did the
too.
same thing. They didn't want
Absolutely.
to put the money into twisted pair copper or fiber,
Right.
so they put it into Wi-Fi and things like that. So
Yep. And similar to that, now is the opportunity to deploy agents that are autonomous and can, hunt down threat actors inside your system and shut them down. And that I argue from that for once, AI gives the advantage to the defender because we've always said, the attackers got the advantage because, they just have to be right once, whereas the defender has to be right all the time. AI is giving us the ability to be right all the time. We can do it all. And to me, that says we're going to raise the cost for the attacker, which is kind of the ultimate goal of any security strategy. And we are actually going to see a decrease in cybercrime and the types of attacks that have happened this week with Harrods and Co-op and a couple other retailers in England.
Yep.
And that's the pie in the sky that I get accused of. But you have to look at what if, and if we're going to deploy these amazingly powerful things, they're going to have an impact. And one of the impacts is going to be on the threat actors. Also going to have a damaging impact on the entire cybersecurity industry. I tracked, some 4,380 vendors, all different products, all
amazing, huh?
all products that do something and people pay for.
Yeah.
And just imagine if all of a sudden there aren't news stories for us to talk about every week to scare you. And just people are it's just going to go away. Not a big problem. Ransomware, one person has to have their computer restored instead of the entire company or organization. So that's going to, slow down our industry. It's the second thing that I pointed out on your show for the first time uh, that could be, good for the world, but bad for the industry.
Yeah.
And I think to that point, let me jump in real quick on that, Mike. The
Yeah.
other thing that's going on right now, which is really, I mean, we'll know in a few months looking back. But I mean, it's fascinating to watch, really beyond the scope of this show today. But what's going on in Ukraine and what's going on with China and what's going on around the world, what just happened with India and Pakistan. I mean, we're not going to get involved, and then we are going to get involved, and then we have a deal. It's like
Yeah.
it's like Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I mean, like where normally that would be like a year, or 2 years, or I mean, it's like it's moving so fast. I don't tend to be an expert on India, Pakistani military issues, but I mean, it's what happens with Ukraine, what happens with China and the U.S. and these deals, and they talk about other deals beyond just the tariffs. Again, getting beyond the scope of this talk today, but I think that's another piece of what Richard's talking about. Will that change with Russia and China, or will it not? Will it accelerate? I mean, only time will tell. But the technology and then the geopolitical environment is rapidly evolving around us.
Yeah. Yes. Speaking of crazy things going on, you were both at various conferences. What was the topics at those conferences? What was the big thing everyone was talking about? Well, was it AI or was it beyond that?
Oh, at RSA for sure, it was AI, and it was kicked off because on Monday of conference week, Palo Alto announced they're buying one of these 100 AI startups for a jaw-dropping $620 million
Whoa.
for a company with 40 people and less than 10 million in revenue. So, we're talking 62x revenue. So it's
Yeah, they must see something way out in the future, right? So,
well, Palo Alto, the year before said they're going after a $34 billion AI security market, which I don't know who made that number up for them, but it's big, so yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I would agree. AI is the big story. And then, it's like I said, obviously RSA is a cybersecurity conference, but the conference I was at was not. It was really a conference around CIO priorities, IT priorities, and certainly AI and cyber were at the top of that list.
Dan,
Um, uh,
I got to ask you, when I think of state government,
yeah.
um, I I think a lot about transportation, right? Because we got
Yeah,
our highway systems and all the
sure.
rest. And in San Francisco for the entire week, I only rode in driverless taxi cabs, Waymo,
Wow.
and it's mind blowing. But boy, does it work! It's so cool. And so the question in my mind is that on the radar of the CIOs? Will they get involved in some way in either providing infrastructure or something? I don't know, because so far it seems to be a city by city thing.
Yeah, and I say it. Good lawyer answer. It depends. I mean, I
Uh,
know every state autonomous, whether that be, by the way, drones as well, but whether
right?
that be dealing with roads and smart cities, smart roads,
Yeah.
smart everything, is certainly on the agenda for every state government. In some cases, there's a cliche in state government and local state and local government SLED, state and local government education. It's like you've seen one state, you've seen one state. So every state is
Yeah,
different. I mean,
they are.
it's not. It's like some are very decentralized, where that tends to be like in the Department of Transportation. Michigan we have MDOT, and Texas they have TxDOT, Texas Department of Transportation. So it's like in some cases they're very decentralized. In other cases, it's very centralized. The state CIO has control over the whole kind of, you know, different things. But certainly, all the departments of transportation around the country, with the U.S. Department of Transportation, this is top of mind, and everyone's kind of waiting for. We haven't got talked about Elon Musk yet, but I mean,
Yeah.
whether that be
That was my
something.
next one I was going to bring up.
Okay, it's
Go
coming,
ahead.
but I
So,
mean, whether it be Waymo, or whether it be other vendors that different people are involved in, autonomous is certainly out there as the holy grail, if you want to say that. I mean, it's a holy grail certainly for Uber. It's also the holy grail for wide variety of different companies out there, and certainly Tesla is one of them as well. But I mean, the reality is that we'll see if in the next year or two. It also happens to be, Richard, one of the big things that I'm sure you realize, that maybe I don't know if you talked to any vendors around this at RSA. It's one topic that people think will be one of the next big cyber frontier, if you will, as well, because we've all seen the movies, and you guys had your own little book on that you wrote. But the idea that you could hack a car and commit murder, that's going to be the top subject of some movie coming out pretty soon. I mean,
I
the
like that
idea.
idea, Richard. We should probably do that novella before somebody else
Hey,
does.
yeah, we,
I
we, we can
mean,
never
you
lose
can
track,
control
Mike,
that
that
car. If I
Dan's the
knew
only
Richard
person who's
was,
ever read our book.
if I knew you were in that Waymo taxi cab, somebody could have
Right?
done something about that. So yeah, I mean, but those are certainly hot topics. It was not hot this spring so much, but it is something that is coming up a lot. And you know, there are two schools of thought. I mean, I just throw this out there, Mike. And to Richard, you tell me. You may disagree, Richard. Some people say, yeah, it's great in downtown San Francisco. It's great with these structured environments, Phoenix or whatever. Never going to work in a snowstorm in Michigan. Never going to work in fill in the blank. And of course, the insurance issues around that, and there's a lot of legal and political discussions related. But I think everyone kind of knows it's coming between now and 2030. We just don't know when that headline's going to drop.
Yep. Well,
Speaking
I
of
certainly,
headlines, let me leap in. You brought up that name, Elon Musk, who always seems to be in the news in some way or another. He's proposing that all the cybersecurity stuff going on with the federal government be merged into one database. And a lot of people don't think that's a good idea, but I wanted to get your opinion on that. Whoever wants to take that first.
well, okay. Um, I appreciate you asking that question because it's a great question. I think the it, I could see the appeal of putting everything in one data lake, so it's more efficient. The infrastructure be shared, so it totally makes sense. The trouble is the government hasn't demonstrated that it can secure each of the silos. So if you put them all in, every time you add one of the silos to another one, it's a factorial thing. You increase the value of that data in one place. Because, for instance, today, China, if they want data on U.S. citizens, they have to hack the IRS and the Social Security Administration and whatever else, selective service for men over a certain age. I don't know, and put it together themselves. If you put it all in one place, it's a super, super valuable place, collection of data, much more valuable than the separate silos. So it'll be highly, highly targeted. In order to do that properly, I don't think the government or Elon Musk has a clue as to how to do it. You have to do it in post-quantum encryption methodologies. You have to manage those keys with the ultimate in physical security, right? It's like literally put it in a bunker. And I just don't see the U.S. government leading the way ever in figuring out how to do data security properly.
Yeah, I would just add to that, a little different twist. I mean, I really think that it's a privacy question more than it. I mean, it is a cybersecurity question. To Richard's point, it's certainly can they execute this in much the same way? Can we do autonomous vehicles nationwide that are secure that don't kill people? I mean, these are challenges. And to Richard's point, I think no government has not shown an ability to do that. But beyond that, let's assume technologically you could do it. I think the bigger question for me is the privacy implications of it. I mean, what data is being accessed by whom? I mean, I understand why they're saying, we used to talk about this in state government all the time, that why is it that we're changing your address 18 times with every agency? Can we have one ID in the same way you change your Amazon address in Amazon.com, and you don't have to say, well, that was for me ordering kitchen supplies, but now I'm ordering a book, so I have it's a different database and I have to change the address over again. I mean, we don't do that with Amazon, right? We do it once, and Dan Lohrmann's address is Dan Lohrmann's address, and whether you're ordering books or kitchen supplies or bikes, it's going to the same place. And so, I mean, the efficiency piece and also the ability to pull in tax records and say, okay, I want to find fraudulent transactions that are happening with businesses that are stealing money from Medicare and Medicaid. I mean, I just saw one person who was a Democrat, by the way, on the news over the weekend, not a Republican, who's saying, yeah, there is a lot of fraud that we could be stopping in Medicare and Medicaid. I think we all want to stop fraud. Nobody wants to cut Medicare and Medicaid. But if you want to stop the fraud, nobody's for the fraud. So I see a lot of value. What I don't see is a discussion around, okay, where do we draw these lines? I would love to see some open discussions about what the value is. Talk to the American people about, that benefit, that cost benefit analysis around the privacy policies related to this data, because that's a discussion that I'm not hearing right now in America.
I'd rather us take the direction that Estonia did, which I visited Estonia in 2009, and they took me on this tour of how they call it IBAN, I think. So the internet was envisioned as a freeway, and each department of government, and think of Estonia as more like a U.S. state, right? It's about the same size, 3 million people. No, 1.5 million people, 3 million cell phones. They have more cell phones than people. And each government agency had a secure gateway to the internet. So if a policeman wanted to access the DMV records or arrest records or whatever they access, they would do that and be credentialed and have access controls over what they could get into. If they wanted to go into the tax records, they wouldn't be able to. And that's how they did it, so it was decentralized and with all these controls over who had privileges. And it was a great concept, to fit in with the standards that we all know and love.
Hey, I also want to talk about two attacks that each of you sent me something on. One was the Harrods attack, and one that I sent to you, actually. The FBI saying that a lot of the old routers are easy to hack. Gee, I can understand that totally. So let's, Richard, I think you brought up the Harrod attack, right?
Yeah. Harrods, of course, big department store in London. If it's kind of on everybody's stop or bucket list when they go to London is visit Harrods, and it is cool. It's awesome. Um, and so they were under attack and made a lot of services, especially their online services, unavailable. They claimed you could still buy stuff in the stores, so that's good. But it comes in a series of attacks against UK retailers. So they're probably, copycat kind of attacks the way Lowe's, TJX, all the rest here in the US got hit years ago.
And then also the FBI thing where they said that 13 of the routers were easy to hack. Um,
That is such old news. Where did they? That's like,
they resuscitated that, huh?
yeah, it reminds me of the FBI saying, don't use,
XYZ router or something, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Yes, routers, you never look at them, right? And, when maybe you change the password to something that you could tell, visitors that they could log into your Wi-Fi. Um, but that's the problem is, you don't monitor them and do stuff with them. So, and Linksys is usually the big culprit, but every other access point on the market has had easy to compromise from the internet vulnerabilities. So they do that.
Yeah, and I
Absolutely.
would just say I agree, Richard. It's been around for a while. We've been talking about that issue for a decade plus.
Yep.
I don't have as much problem with you as I mean, to slightly disagree. I'm not going to disagree. I love them bringing it up every now and then. It does need some public awareness. So if there's some new whatever surge that happened in March, that first 3 months of the year there were some number of statistically large number of attacks. I have no problem with the FBI
Yeah.
flagging that and saying, "Hey, people, it's time. You that router you bought in 2014 isn't that is a problem. It's a problem." And so people, I do want to say, people have asked me, how can you fix this? I mean, I posted it on LinkedIn a couple like last week, I think, and I was surprised at 30, 40, 50 comments, and some people were like, "Give me a solution." Well, I mean, there are a
Solution
lot of
is
different
buy a new one, right?
buy a new
So
one, but I mean, or if people don't want to deal with it, if you're out there or you have your grandmother and you're like, you can also lease these. People say, well, it'll cost you a lot more because you're going to $10 a month for,
Right.
Xfinity or whatever it might be. But they're going to also give you free upgrades every 9 or 12 months. So you can literally bring it in and get a new one and upgrade to the latest model, the latest speeds, upgrade, get faster ones and new capabilities. And they also hopefully maybe take a little more responsibility for upgrading the firmware and the software and all the rest of it. So I mean, there are solutions outsourcing the problem. If there are those out there like, I just don't want to have to deal with this. You can also roll it into a number of different packages, business packages people have for their ISPs, where they'll throw in the router with you. And then when you negotiate that, say, hey, yeah, but I want to be able to get upgrades as well. So can I get a new one every 12 months or whatever it might be?
like
So,
a cell phone kind of thing, right?
yep,
So
Yeah.
exactly.
yeah.
Build it into the
Yep.
plan.
I totally agree with that, Dan. The only comfort I have right now is that I just upgraded my router. So, but that doesn't mean it's okay, right? Because these things get compromised as soon as you plug them in. So you do have to, change the default password for sure. And then if you can monitor it in any way, that would be a good thing. But even I don't have time to do that.
So both of you guys deal with a lot of big companies where they have a CISO or a CIO at the very least. One of the things we've been talking about, I had Tamara Shoemaker on again from Cyber Patriot, and she was talking about just the little and in Sensei, the governor's new
Yeah.
project, very focused on small to medium businesses. And the startling thing for me is most of those businesses really don't even understand what's going on in cybersecurity, don't have anybody that can make sure they're secure. I mean, that's where the Sensei's and other folks come in. But when is small business going to figure that especially if they're selling e-commerce? Because if they're down, they get hit. They could be down for weeks. What does that mean to your business? I mean, what does it take to get the rest of the small operations to understand they got to take this seriously.
Ransomware, for a decade now, the bad guys have been demonstrating to small businesses that they have to take security seriously via ransomware. You get hit by ransomware, you become a security expert really fast. And it's just everybody's got to have that experience. Just like I always say, you can't, it's as difficult as telling people to use two-factor authentication for their Facebook account because they are going to get hacked because they use their favorite password that they use somewhere else, and somebody takes over their account and starts selling Ray-Ban sunglasses on their account, and then you have to email all your friends and say, I'm sorry, I've been hacked. And it's very embarrassing. And they contact Facebook, and Facebook says, hey, click here, provide your phone number, and nobody will be able to do that anymore. And then they do the same thing with Twitter, and their Twitter account gets taken over, and they're advertising Ray-Ban sunglasses again. So it's something. It's the best. Being hacked is the best security awareness training there is, and it's the only one that is kind of universal. It just gets out there.
Yeah.
And sadly, unfortunately, I agree, Richard, 100%. Businesses go under. I mean, there are people that actually don't come back after a ransomware attack. So I think one thing I would just add to that, Mike, is beyond Richard's comment is more and more companies, small companies, even large companies are outsourcing or, finding a partner using what the buzzword people that manage services. You're saying, look, in the same way you see these commercials on TV, let us do your HR, let us do your, let us be your accountant. You can't hire your own accountant because you can't afford your own accountant. More and more, we're seeing a lot of trends around the country where people are just going to managed services, like Sensei and, David Bean and Governor Snyder. I worked closely with both of them, obviously, and part of the Snyder administration back more than a decade ago. So, solutions where there's a variety of companies that do it. Presidio does it, a company I work for, but a lot of different ones. That's not a commercial message. The reality is find somebody at the right price. Somebody who can provide the services that you need. And if you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the expertise, and you're listening to this, you need to have a trusted partner who you can rely on to do cybersecurity if you can't do it yourself. And we could spend a lot of time talking about what that really means, but this is not a once a year, check the thing, hour done, see you next January. This is a 724, 365 thing. As Richard says, it might be getting cheaper with new bots and new things coming out. But right now, the attacks in May 2025 continue.
Reach out to me. I've got a list of 300 MSSPs. About, I think, 187 of them are here in the U.S. And there's many, many more.
And how do they do that, Richard?
Yeah, just ping me on LinkedIn.
And then if they want to buy this book with your 4,000 cybersecurity, I'm helping you out here, though, buddy.
Yeah, appreciate
So they want to buy that book that was so popular at RSA that you didn't have time to go to any of the sessions. Where do they find that book?
Good pitching there.
Oh.
It is on Amazon. So just search Security Yearbook and it'll pop up. Buy the latest one because
25. That's right, 2025.
Yep. 2025. Yes, hard to believe, and it's almost to the middle of 2025 already. That's even harder to believe.
Yeah, I know.
So, Dan, final thoughts? How do people reach you?
Yeah, LinkedIn as well. Dan Lohrmann on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out, and also Lohrmann on Cybersecurity. It's my weekly blog on Government Technology Magazine, but just type Lohrmann on Cyber. It pops right up, and weekly blog. My latest one I just mentioned. We talked about routers, but this legacy issue is out there. There's a big article that came out. We didn't get time to talk about it in the UK. They're saying like 27% of systems in the UK, United Kingdom, England government are legacy, that they're not supported anymore. And so whatever systems you have, you need to be making sure that these things are being patched, that you are monitoring and managing them, and that is a big challenge. I do have hope, as Richard mentioned, that AI and some of these new tools that we talked about can help people upgrade some of that legacy equipment.
And you got to believe the bad guys who are so good at hacking, we're going to use AI, and it's going to be measures and countermeasures all over again, right?
For sure.